So the Epstein files dropped, and I've been watching everyone talk about it. And here's what I realized: nothing is going to happen. The Epstein files dropped, and nothing is going to change. But here's what pisses me off. I already failed this test once. COVID. I had friends warning me, telling me it was bullshit. And I thought they were crazy. I chose security over truth. I fell in line because I was scared. I was scared that, I wouldn't be able to work, scared that I'd lose my income. I let fear make my decisions. And as the oldest son, the man of the house, it was my responsibility to protect my family from the same psyop. Unfortunately, I failed. But the guys who stood their ground, they have a clear conscience now. They knew it was bullshit, and they didn't bend. And I lost my edge. I got psyoped. I got manipulated. I stopped thinking for myself. But you know what? I've been rebuilding since then. Getting my critical thinking back, realigning with God, getting my edge back. And now with all this Epstein shit, it's happening again. The same playbook, the same manipulation, the same distractions. They show you the evidence. They prove the conspiracy theorists are right. And then they distract you with the next thing so that you just forget about it. Forget about it. You move on, you do nothing. That's the playbook. And if you fell for COVID like I did, well, you're going to fall for this one too. Most guys, they will choose comfort over truth. But not me. Not this time. I failed once. I learned my lesson. And I'm never falling for it again. And I mean that. Because here's the thing. When COVID hit, I had multiple friends telling me, don't fall for this. This is bullshit. They're just trying to control you. And, I didn't listen. Not because I believed in it, but because I was just terrified of losing my job. Terrified of not being able to provide for my family, provide for myself. Terrified of losing everything that I'd worked so hard for. So I chose security over truth. I abandoned the standards that I thought I had. I stopped thinking for myself. And, looking back at it now, the guys who resisted, the guys who stood their ground and said, fuck that, I'm not doing it, they can sleep at night. They have a clear conscience. They knew it was a psyop and they didn't bend. And you know what? I envy them. Because I lost something during that time. I lost my edge. I lost my ability to think critically. I lost my mojo where I stood up for what I believed in. And it's taken me years to rebuild. Because I got psyoped systematically, strategically. The environments that I was in, the people around me, the content that I was consuming, it all manipulated me into abandoning my standards. And I'm not the only one. A lot of guys fell for it. A lot of guys chose security over truth. A lot of guys abandoned their values because they were scared. And now we're all paying the consequences for it. So when the Epstein files dropped and I'm watching everyone talk about it, I'm seeing the same patterns play out again. And it pisses me off. Because it's happening again. The evidence is all out in the open. The names are there, the details are there. Conspiracy theorists were right again. And nothing is going to change. People will talk about it for days, for a few days. Get outraged on Twitter, share a few posts, and then get back to their lives because they've got bills to pay. mortgages to worry about, and kids to feed. And this feels like someone else's problem. And that's what pisses me off the most. Not that it's happening, but that we're all so desensitized to it now that we can't even bring ourselves to care. Some of us have known about this for a long time. I mean, you could call them conspiracy theorists, you can call them crazy, but they've been right. And, we've reached a point where it's just karmic retribution. They've been telling us for a long time. They've been showing this to us for many years, for so long, that we've become completely desensitized to it. To the point where now we're just asking, okay, so what are we actually going to do about this? And, the answer is nothing. Because the elites are corrupt, the government's corrupt, the higher-ups are all in on it. The elites, the government, the powerful, they've been showing this to us for years. And we've just become numb to it. They show you the evidence. They prove the conspiracy theorists are right. And then they distract you with the next thing. A celebrity scandal, a sports controversy, Bad Bunny at the Super Bowl singing in Spanish. And suddenly, everyone's arguing about that instead of kids being harmed on an island. That's how they do it. That's how they keep you so busy fighting with your neighbour over lawn care and politics that you don't have enough time or energy to care about what actually matters. So you forget about Epstein. You move on, so you do nothing. And that's the playbook. That's how it works. And if you fell for it before, like I did, well, you're going to fall for it again. Because I already failed this test once. And I see guys right now about to fail it again. They're going to choose comfort over truth. They're going to choose security over standing up for what's right. They're going to let fear make their decisions for them. Just like I did. And that's why I'm making this video. Because I don't want you to make the same mistake that I did. So then, what does this mean for us? For us regular guys just trying to live their lives, trying to get by, just trying to survive the next day. What can we do? What does this mean for us? For us guys who just don't have the power or platforms or influence. What does this mean for us? And here's what I realized. There's not much I can do about Epstein. I'm not at a level where I can make arrests happen or force trials. But the one thing that I do have is my voice. And being naturally introverted, growing up as a shy kid, I finally have the courage to open up, to speak up, to put myself out there. And I think there's a lesson in that. If you have something to say and you feel like your words carry weight, don't be afraid to speak up. Don't be afraid to tell the truth and say it how it is. Don't let opposing forces try to shut you up if you have something within you that can truly change people's lives for the better. Because if you can make an impact, move the needle, or even just make a tiny wave in the ocean, that can ripple and echo throughout the ages, all over the world, globally. And that is where I'm at now. In terms of actually making an impact on the whole Epstein stuff, look, I'm not as successful as Andrew Tate. Not yet, at least. I'm not at that level of power where I can just do anything about it directly, influence politics. I'm not quite there. And I don't think I want to be, to be honest. But even just doing this video and talking about it now is something. All we have is our voice. It all started with the Word. If you look at the Bible, the Word was God. And that's where it all started. But here's the other thing that pisses me off. There was a time where I was a critical thinker, a time when I went against the grain. I didn't believe everything I saw on TV or online. I thought my own thoughts. But, as you get older, the environments that you're in, the people that you surround yourself with, the content that you're consuming, it systematically and strategically manipulates your character. And, unfortunately, I was psyoped into the whole COVID situation. I was affected because of my work. If I didn't fall into line, then I couldn't work. And because I was down at that point in my life and had nothing else going for me, I stopped thinking for myself and I fell victim to it. I wasn't strong enough to think for myself, let alone protect my family from the same psyop. And that pisses me off the most. I had friends telling me, fuck that, I don't agree with it. It's all bullshit. They're trying to program you. But I thought they were crazy at the time. All I could think about was trying to survive, trying to have a job, having the security of an income, which is exactly what they used as a scare tactic. And as time went by, we realized it was all a show. The ones who resisted are the ones who have a clear conscience now. The ones who were able to sleep at night, the ones who stood their ground. And I envy them in that way. I wish I still had my edge, my mojo, where I thought for myself. But I lost that when I abandoned my standards. And now I'm paying the consequences for it. As the oldest son and the man of the house, I feel like it was my responsibility to protect my family. And I failed to do that. I pray to God that my family is protected, that they're okay, that I know they're going to be okay with God's protection. But I feel like I could have prevented things if I just thought for myself. And that's what kills me the most. Because here's what I learned through all of this, right? I've been broken down before and rebuilt so many times over and over. I've conditioned myself to have that critical thinking again. I feel like I'm able to stand up for what's right. I've almost realigned myself with the true values that I believe in, rather than being told what to do. I now have that power back to think and make decisions for myself. Instead of life happening to me, I feel like I can happen to life. And I think that's the key for guys who have been through similar instances where they dropped their standards, they lost themselves, they abandoned their values. Unfortunately, they got the short end of the stick, and now they regret those decisions. They wish they were stronger, more resilient, more resistant back then. And that's the whole point of why I'm doing this. I want guys to be able to find that fire within them again. I want them to have that tenacity, that resilience, that warrior inside. I want them to tap into that masculine energy that Jesus embodied. Standing up for what's right and knowing you have the power within you. And it all starts with getting clear on what it is that you actually want and speaking to God for guidance, clarity, and direction. Every morning when I pray, even if I see 11:11 a.m., 11:11 p.m., or 3:33 p.m. or a.m. on the clock, or if I'm making a wish on my birthday, the one thing that I always ask for is for God to impart His wisdom upon me, just like He did for King Solomon. I learned that from him. Instead of asking for money or health, all these things, I just ask for God's wisdom now. Because if I had that wisdom earlier, I would have known better. I would have known not to fall to the enemy. I would have known not to abandon my standards. I would have known to protect my family. But I didn't have it back then. And I failed. And now I'm making up for it. Now I'm rebuilding. Not just my body, not just my finances, but my ability to think for myself, my ability to stand up for what's right, my ability to not let fear control me. And that's what this is all about. That's why I'm doing this whole YouTube thing. That's why I'm speaking up, even though I'm naturally introverted. That's why I'm putting myself out there, even though it's uncomfortable. Because I finally have the courage to use my voice, to speak up. And if my words can even make a tiny wave, if they can ripple and echo, well, then it's worth it. And it's worth it. Because I'm not at Andrew Tate's level. I don't have that power or platform to make a massive impact. But I have my voice. And that's all any of us have. So if you have something to say, if your words carry weight, don't be afraid to speak up. Don't be afraid to tell the truth. Don't let them shut you up if you have something inside you that can change lives. Because right now with Epstein, most guys are going to fall for it. They're going to let the system distract them again. They're going to choose comfort over truth. They're going to abandon their standards out of fear, just like I did. But you don't have to. Get your critical thinking back. Realign with God. Ask for wisdom, not for comfort. Every morning, ask yourself 3 questions. What am I being told to believe today? Or, who benefits from me believing it? What would happen if I didn't believe it? That's how you think for yourself again. That's how you get your edge back. Because once you start asking those questions, you can't unsee it. You start seeing the patterns. You start seeing the manipulation. You start seeing how they control you. And once you see it, you can't fall for it again. To be honest, I don't even follow politics because it doesn't change anything in my life. But we're forced into it with threats of fines. It's just all bullshit. All just little bullshit, right? We just get bombarded with so much information that you eventually go down a rabbit hole and think, well, what's the point of life? And that's why a lot of guys fall into depression and anxiety. They feel hopeless. They feel powerless. Like they have no control over anything. That's the defeatist mindset. I went through that during many stages of my life. And it does nothing for you. It doesn't serve you in any way whatsoever. And I'm glad I made it out to the other side. Thank God. I've got that fire. I've got that mojo back. I can see the light. Jesus reached down, offered his hand, and said, "Walk with me." And now I'm taking those steps, doing what I can to glorify God, build his kingdom here on earth. I'm 33 now. I'm rebuilding from zero by choice. I'm doing dog sitting. I'm doing site inspections, just odd jobs here and there while I'm building this. And again, most people think I'm crazy for not just getting a job, a full-time corporate 9 to 5, for not just playing the game. But I learned my lesson. I chose security once and I lost myself. I chose comfort and I abandoned my standards. And I'm never doing that again. I'd rather rebuild from zero and think for myself. I'd rather do that than be comfortable and controlled. And that's the message. That's what the Epstein files mean to me. It's a reminder. Don't fall for it. Don't let them distract you. Don't let them manipulate you. Don't abandon your standards. Because they're going to keep trying. They're going to keep trying. This won't be the last time. I guarantee that. And most guys will fall for it, just like I did. But you don't have to. I already failed once, and I'm never failing again. Anyways, thought I'd just ramble on about something that's clearly trending at the moment, that clearly everyone's talking about. Maybe not talking about enough. But I guess that's just my 2 cents on it. If you found this valuable, drop a comment. Tell me if you've been through something similar. Tell me if you've fell for it before, once as well. Or tell me if you stood your ground. Let's be honest. Anyways, it's a beautiful day in Melbourne. Probably gonna go for a walk now. Get my steps in. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.